The number one recruit in the country, AJ Dybantsa, picked BYU. There's a lot of interesting nuggets coming out from this and what it means for KU.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Derek Johnson. Thanks for listening along with Locked On Jayhawks, and thank you to everydayers catching each and every episode. Thank you for making it your first listen every day. We're free and available anywhere you get your podcasts, including on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the show. On today's edition of Locked On Jayhawks, we are talking about AJ Dybantsa, the number one recruit in the country, picking a fellow Big 12 school in the BYU Cougars. What exactly does it mean for the Jayhawks that Dybantsa is going to be playing for BYU? Because I think there's some interesting things that we can take away from this decision, I guess. So AJ Dybantsa, he is the number one overall recruit in the class of 2025. He's a stud athletic wing, projected to be the future 2026 number one pick in the NBA draft, though there are some other good candidates for that, including Darryn Peterson, who is committed to KU, but he picked BYU. Kansas was in the Final Four. He was in the finalists. It seemed like it was mostly between BYU and Alabama was kind of the thought among people coming into it, but supposedly he signed his national letter of intent 3 weeks ago. So all of this run up of maybe any light rumors of, is he going to go to Alabama? Is he going to do this or that? It was just rumor. It was just hearsay, just to maybe drive up the decision or what was going to happen there. He ends up going on First Take, which I don't know why, whatever. Anyway, Adam Zagoria reported that Dybantsa is getting close to $7 million in NIL for this to happen, which I think certainly is interesting. I think it's interesting for a couple of reasons. One, it's interesting that it's being publicized, because what does that do across the sport? Does that make it so that other top recruits are like, hey, I want $7 million, right? How feasible is that, right? Because I don't know how many colleges are going to be able to lump that together for one player, in the basketball side of things. And so if that's going to become more of the norm, the asking price, like what is this going to do to what those players are asking for? I don't know. Like, does it make it so that the other BYU players are mad because they're like, hey, I'm only getting $50,000. I'm only getting $100,000. What's up with this? What impact does that have across the country? I think is very interesting. Beyond that, obviously this has an impact because he just straight up didn't pick Kansas. Kansas was in the finalist list and he didn't pick them, but it was never really expected that Dybantsa was going to wind up a Jayhawk, even when he was in the Final Four, even the finalist list. Like, there was never really much rumors connecting like that this was actually a chance for KU, that it was a formality that it just wasn't going to happen. And whether it's the shoe deal stuff or whatever, like, it was just never really expected to happen. So if you do think they actually had a shot by being a finalist, then I guess you could say, they're not as good as they could be if they had him. You could say that, oh, well, now they have extra NIL money lying around to go get other players. But again, I don't think realistically they were ever going to get him. So I don't know that it's like all of a sudden, oh, you were planning on having AJ Dybantsa, and now you don't. Now you have to adjust to that. I don't think that's really the case. It is interesting that, again, they even made the Final Four and that you had Curtis Townsend like visiting him within the last week. Is that just Kansas helping his party drive up the price to hurt BYU's budget? Is it just doing each other a solid, right? Like, KU drives up the price, gets their name out there on the number one recruit in the country. Does it help the perception of KU with top tier recruits where they're like, hey, look, they were in on a kid who's making $7 million and they have Darryn Peterson. Like, if you're Nate Ament, for instance, does that make it more appealing now? I don't know. Or like, does it help with future recruits in some way? I don't know. But I will say this. I know I am very excited for Darryn Peterson against AJ Dybantsa. Let's get into that more and more of the impact of this with him picking BYU on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com. You can join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL and the Locked On Podcast Network. Continuing on with this bonus episode of the show, we'll have a KU football portal roundup episodes coming at you here with LOJ as well. So what other impact does this have on KU that Dybantsa, the number one recruit in the country, picked BYU? Well, they'll have to beat him. Now, it might just be one time in a season. It could be, I guess hypothetically up to 4 times in a season if you had to play him in the Big 12 tournament and then met in the NCAA tournament. But realistically, probably 2 times that you'll have to play. I mean, if you're Brett Yormark, it would be a mistake. And I don't know what all goes into the scheduling process here. Like, for instance, Kansas is only playing Arizona once this year, right? So I don't know how, random it is versus I don't know how they go about making the schedule. But if you're Brett Yormark, if you are the Big 12 schedulers, do everything in your power to make it so that Kansas and BYU play home and home next season, that they get to play twice. Because the Darryn Peterson versus AJ Dybantsa matchups are going to be absolutely awesome. They already have been at the high school level. They just played against each other, and Dybantsa put up 28 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists. Peterson actually outdueled him. He had 32 points with 10 rebounds and 8 assists, and his team won the game, which now, Darryn Peterson now has wins over Dybantsa and Cam Boozer, who's the other top 3 recruit in the country, who those 3 seem like the ones who are most in the running for, future number 1 pick in the 2026 draft. But those matchups when Peterson's facing Dybantsa, it's going to be national eyeballs to you. It's going to be college basketball national eyeballs interested. It's going to be NBA scout eyeballs interested. It's going to be just the casual fan interested. Do that game home and home. Because I think it would be really, really awesome and will go a long way in both of those players like NBA, futures, not necessarily in terms of whoever wins that game, it's going to impact their NBA career, but it might impact who goes higher in the draft, for instance. And in addition to that, if both end up living up to the recruiting potential and being as good as you think, you would imagine both teams are going to be pretty good next season. And so you get that matchup too. And I think, that's what's going to be really cool about this is the idea that BYU is clearly investing in sports. They're clearly investing in basketball, and they become yet another threat in a conference that is filled with threats. So let's get into that in a second here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Bonus episode today brought to you by Omaha Steaks. A perfect gift for you to give out maybe during the Christmas season. Well, nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. It's guaranteed perfection in every single bite. And right now you can save on unforgettable gifts with 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, score an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. With 5 generations of experience, they consistently deliver the world's best steak experience. And the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages featuring gourmet favorites. From legendary steaks to mouth-watering desserts and more, save 50% off site-wide for limited time at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners get an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com, OMAHA steaks.com, and an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. Minimum purchase may apply with Omaha Steaks. Finishing up this bonus episode again, don't forget you can check out some of our early episodes in the week. We'll get a KU NC State preview later this week. We'll also get a little bit of a roundup on portal targets and KU hiring Matt Lubick to the football team on our upcoming episodes of Locked On Jayhawks. So obviously this has an impact in terms of what does it do national recruiting wise? How does it affect the NIL game? It has the tangible matchup potential of when he's playing Kansas and when you have him versus Peterson and what that can do for the sport and getting eyeballs on both teams and everything like that. But beyond that, this also, like I said, it speaks to how invested BYU is in the Big 12 and gives Kansas another challenger in the conference in a league that is filled with just that, plenty of challengers, right? I mean, you think about Houston, they're bringing in a good recruiting class this year. Obviously they've been one of the best programs in the country since Kelvin Sampson has really gotten things rolling there. Iowa State has really got things rolling these past couple of years with TJ Otzenberger. Baylor, right, typically is a contender for the conference. You add Arizona to the conference. I mean, this league is absolutely loaded, and now you have BYU investing as much in it as probably any of those schools when you're talking about a monetary basis of things. And then you add to it the Kansas, kind of struggling these past couple seasons, right? I mean, If Kansas doesn't make it past the second weekend this year, which based on what we saw this past week, I don't know, that isn't a guarantee. I think it would be the first time since like the late 90s that Kansas hasn't made it past the first weekend for 3 consecutive seasons, unless you counted like 2020, which I don't because there was no NCAA tournament. So point being, you look at this, and when you look at the new era of college basketball, NIL is going to play as important of a factor as anything. And BYU is clearly establishing themselves as a threat to, competition for you on the recruiting trail, to what they can bring monetarily, that they could very well end up being one of the top competitors year in, year out with yourself, with the Houstons of the world, with the Iowa States, the Baylors, or whoever. Obviously, a big part of these is also like who's your coach at the time. But, the Big 12 just continuously ends up being this endless gauntlet that is impossible to, not have a bunch of competitive teams. But it also has an impact in terms of, you look at the class of 2026 or class of 2027, and whatever top tier recruit Kansas is going for, BYU can go after too and say, hey, look, we got a bunch of NIL money too. We can go after it the same way. And it certainly makes things very interesting from, another kind of heavyweight, so to speak, in the Big 12. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. Like I said, we'll be back to talk a little Matt Lubick being hired as the co-offensive coordinator for KU and a little KU football portal roundup. See you then.